Fantastic. Well, welcome to you all, and many thanks for sparing the time to be with us today. I know what it's like in this new world, and your diary can fill up so quickly with different virtual meetings. So we're very grateful to everyone for attending. It's a pleasure to welcome you all to today's meeting of the Cross-Party Group on Cooperatives and Mutuals. I'm Vicky Howells. I'm the Member of Senedd for the Cynon Valley, and I'm the chair of this cross-party group. It is great to see you all. I can see that we've got, we did have Mike Hedges. He seems to have, oh, there he is, he's still there. Yeah, great. We've got Mike Hedges, and we've got apologies as well from John Griffiths, from Mark Isherwood, and from Janet Finch Saunders. And hopefully we may see one or two other members of the Senedd popping in a little bit later if their diaries permit. Just some housekeeping announcements then before we begin. First of all, to let you know that we are going to be recording today's session to share with a wider audience at a later date. If there's anyone who is not minded to want to appear on that recording, you can of course turn your video off, and you can change your display name if you so wish. But hopefully everyone will be proud to be visible as part of that recording. Everyone seems to be muted now, which is great, but if I can just remind you to stay muted until the end. So what we're going to do is to have all the presentations first, and then we're going to take questions at the end of the session, which will probably be around 3 o'clock. So when 3 o'clock starts to appear, that would be a great time for people to put their questions into the Zoom group chat. We think that's probably the easiest way then for us to proceed with allowing the speakers to answer your questions. But if you could just hold on to those ideas until we come in towards the end of the session, just because I know from experience people can get a bit distracted and get into the group chat rather than listening to the presentations otherwise. So obviously it is Cooperatives Fortnight, and it is good to be exploring such an interesting and important subject, not just how COVID has impacted on the cooperative sector, but also how the principle of cooperatives itself and community enterprise can be central to the recovery. Indeed, the areas that the Welsh Government has discussed in the context of building back better, creating a fairer, greener Wales, can be underpinned by cooperativism. And I think, you know, it's really encouraging that we've got Jeremy Miles leading on that, and he is of course a member of the Cooperative Party. And as the First Minister made plain in his speech at the Cooperative Party earlier this month, and I quote, he said, "Take the lessons and the new ideas that have come out of this crisis and begin the work of rebuilding our economy, our public services and our public realm in a new and stronger way, one in which the cooperative movement in Wales has an important role to play." So I think it really is a crucial time for us as a cooperative movement in terms of how we may be able to influence that recovery for the betterment of the people of Wales. So to tell us more today, we've got 4 excellent speakers. And our first speaker is Dr. Anthony Samuel, who is a senior lecturer in marketing and strategy at Cardiff University, and whose areas of interest include qualitative research into ethical consumption and social enterprise. And perhaps most importantly for me, Dr. Samuel has chosen a wonderful backdrop today, including one of my favourite buildings, St Elvan's Church in Aberdeen. So when you're ready, Dr. Samuel, over to you.
Hi everyone, thanks very much for allowing me to speak. And I guess I'm coming from a quite grey Aberdeen today via Cardiff University, via my office. I'll just start by giving you a little bit of context to my presentation. This is very much a call to action presentation, and I've taken a number of press cuttings and a number of papers, etc., for inspiration and a backdrop to this. So I'd just like to start by putting a backdrop to my inspiration and the context to this caller. Several reports written by Social Enterprise UK, the Welsh Cooperative Centre on the COVID crisis and how we can emerge from it. Several papers that I've produced myself on social enterprises, particularly operating in the South Wales Valleys regions, and how they have several struggles based around finance, support mechanisms, and various other issues that they struggle from in order to be, if you like, effective. But mostly, I guess, one of my inspirations for this talk is Naomi Klein's work and her work around the shock doctrine and the rise of disaster capitalism. In a nutshell, Naomi has just produced a little long read here. I don't know if you can see this. It was published in The Guardian the week before last. How her hypothesis is how big business and seek to maximize profits as hard as possible from disasters. And I guess we can see some of this starting to unfold already in some of the conversations and discourse that we see in our daily press, i.e. the likes of Google and Amazon kind of dominating the agenda at the moment in time. So I'd like to offer maybe a counterbalance, if you like, to that discourse. So that's the backdrop. We're all aware of the economic context that we're in. The stark decline in our GDP. However, what's really interesting that's emerging from this is possibly in the center of this slide is that only 6% of our population allegedly want us to return to the economy that we left behind. And even the Financial Times is actually discussing this idea that COVID-19 is resetting the way we are talking about and discussing how our economy is going to re-emerge from this. So I guess the backdrop is there. The context is there, but the worrying kind of aspect for me is, when I read Naomi Klein's work, is that we're already seeing this kind of dominant narrative and discourse that is being driven by some of the larger corporations of Silicon Valley, for example, who are without doubt gleaming significant profits from this crisis. So if we can take that context maybe and discuss it around another narrative, and that narrative being social entrepreneurship and social enterprise. So what I thought I'd do is just look at 3 areas maybe where we could consider the whole social economy and the social entrepreneurship economy and how we can consider it, how it can emerge for a better Wales. Firstly, I'd just like to maybe look at a few issues around care, for example. We know care homes have been at the epicenter of this crisis, and there's an emerging conversation around how effective our care homes are, how economically viable they are. So, for example, we have 643 care homes in Wales, and allegedly 50% of them are now entering into a vulnerable state. In the UK, there's reports of over 27,000 care homes now proven to be in a vulnerable state in terms of whether they will be closed down completely or if they can be re-emerged in some way. The reason why I've explored this is because I believe this is a ripe area for the cooperative movement and the social enterprise movement to step into this void and this space. We already have 120 care homes across the UK that are run as social enterprises. So there are blueprints available here that when maybe homes do enter into a crisis point, if we do have this 50%, that there are opportunities to borrow from these best practices and these blueprints, maybe to emerge with a better care provision that is not centered on the profit maximizing motive, but is far more centered on social care and social value. And that's not just for the elderly that is also additionally for the workforce and the entire supply chain that contributes to it. There's an emerging debate coming out as well around how we can reconfigure our care homes, looking at better retirement communities. This is something that really kind of I feel passionate about in Wales. I see many retirement communities around some of the more affluent places of England, for example, the Cotswolds, but yet in my own backyard in Aberdeen, the Cannon Valley, where are these retirement communities? Do they exist, and in what fashion? And should we be considering this as a reimagined care package then? And community co-housing as well is back on the agenda. Perfect models for the cooperative movement to start considering. The other thing I wanted to draw your attention to on the slide here is the inevitable mental health crisis that we are seeing emerge as well. And I guess one of the arguments here is that social enterprises, again, are in a good place, hopefully, to contribute to this in some form or fashion. I'll pick up on that in a little while. Education. If I can just draw your attention maybe to some of the things that are going on here. Again, if we think about education, it's going to change next year particularly. It's already changed dramatically. The English government have offered £1 billion already to help those pupils who have fallen behind over the last 10 to 12 weeks. So what I'm arguing here, I guess, is that where do we spend this £1 billion? Do we go business as usual, and in essence give it to some of our if agencies that are providing teachers on if you like 0-hour contracts, etc., or do we look a little bit more innovatively around this crisis? Do we spend money on giving Google and Microsoft subscriptions, etc., or do we look a little bit further into this? There's 3 great examples on this screen here about social enterprises entering into that domain and providing services for schools. One of my arguments is we have some fabulous landscapes in Wales where social enterprises are active. So, for example, we've got Cannon Valley Community Gardens. Can we open those spaces up for better education, for open air education? Can we open up our community centres to make more spaces that are, if you like, socially distanced in terms of their education? Why do we have to look, constantly maybe at the tech solution? Naomi Klein's argument in her position paper in The Guardian is, talking about spending money on mainstream education as opposed to just looking at technical solution where maybe, only 4 out of 10 of our pupils can actively engage, and where we are increasingly seeing the digital divide of the haves and have-nots encroaching on people's educational possibilities. Possibly another example of where the whole social entrepreneurship and the cooperative movement can gain traction, I believe, is one of the weaknesses of the sector is that it's struggled to basically capture the imagination of a more youthful, dynamic population. Times are changing. Our population and our younger population are increasingly more woke. They're increasingly demanding working for companies and organizations that are value-driven. And their consumption patterns are shifting in those ways as well. So we do have a window of opportunity here to sell this proposition far, far more aggressively to get this youthful engagement involved. So I guess those are the 3 kind of pitches that I've gone for. But if we can look at how that actually fits into the agenda, these areas alone, if you look at this side of our of the screen, you can see that we have social care and healthcare being a significant part of the trading activities of the UK social enterprise sector. We also see that the social enterprise sector is a key driver of social inclusion, whether that be female empowerment, or ethnicity empowerment as well. These are kind of key aspects, again, that have started to emerge, I think, from the COVID debate. One of the sadder things that I've seen, I guess, is from Social Enterprise UK's recent research, is that despite many of the emerging problems that are upon us as a result of COVID-19, many of the social enterprises in, if you like, homelessness, disabilities, unemployment, helping drug addiction and mental health, are reporting an expected decrease in the demand for their services. And I'm just wondering where that maybe cognitive dissonance is and how we can close that, in essence, whereas we should be seeing them hopefully being far more positive about their future, despite the crisis that we're in. If I can pick up on those latter points then, the benefits that we're seeing maybe coming out of, whether it's the care sector, whether it's education, or creating a more youthful, dynamic movement, is that we see many of the drawbacks from COVID-19 as being part of the agenda that social enterprises and cooperatives want to contribute to, and have been contributed prior to this this actual pandemic. So we have, for example, 23% of our social enterprises, keen on or actively engaging in profit to improve their community, profit to improve vulnerability within people, profit to address social inclusion, etc. And hopefully you can see on the right-hand side of your screen here how social enterprises compare to our normal FTSE 100 and SMEs in terms of BAM leadership and female leadership. Again, two key parts of our population that have lost out to in this pandemic. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is that the whole COVID-19 crisis offers, ironically, an opportunity for social enterprises and the cooperative movement to lose and shed their, sorry, for want of a better word than shed, so to lose their weaknesses, if you like, and consider them now as strengths, and hopefully to emerge from this with the support and enthusiasm and dynamism of the people on this platform and our government, linking that into our Wellbeing Future Generations Act. So in conclusion, what I'd like to say is that there should be no rest for us now. It's time for us to notice the benefits that this sector can bring. It's time to operationalize it. It's time, hopefully, to show some respect for what these organizations to do and their professional ability, and address those previous weaknesses of maybe them not being commercially astute because they've been more aligned to the charity sector. It's time to energize them, support them, and put some trust in these guys, because they're doing some fantastic things, and they really are at the epicenter of our social kind of evolution beyond this crisis. And lastly, if I can go back to the shock doctrine and Naomi Klein, we are in a disaster capitalism state of affairs here, and we have a number of ways we can emerge out of it. We can go with business as usual, and it's the easiest thing in the world maybe to listen to the big business lobbying and to spend money with these guys to hopefully get us out of this crisis. But I do think we have an opportunity now to support a far more socially astute and socially and caring economy that hopefully the Welsh Government is behind. Thank you very much, and hopefully that was a little bit insightful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Anthony, very much indeed. That was a really stimulating start to the meeting, so thank you. Next up, we have Nisreen Mansour, and Nisreen is Policy Officer at the Wales TUC, where she leads on the organisation's policy work around the economy and the Fair Work agenda. So Nisreen, over to you.
Thanks, Vicky. Let me share my screen with you. Hopefully this should work. There we go. Yeah, so I'm Nisreen Mansour. I work for the Wales Trade Union Congress. For those of you who aren't aware of what we do, we represent 48 trade unions in England and Wales, and they are across the public and private sector. Membership is higher in the public sector, but we have membership right throughout the private and voluntary sectors, and that includes large workplaces, but also self-employed people, so it's a real range. And I'm going to be talking to you today about a sort of brief overview about the impacts of the pandemic on workers, and the Fair Work agenda, which is something that we've been very keen to push with Welsh Government through social partnership, and what fair work and Build Back Better could look like for a couple of sectors where we think that a unionised cooperative model in particular could offer real opportunities for better quality employment. So just a bit of a grim overview of what our labour market looks like at the moment. About a quarter of workers are currently either furloughed or unemployed in Wales, which is absolutely shocking. If someone had said this to us 6 months ago, we just couldn't imagine it. And that's going to be very difficult for us to transition out of. We know we've got a few cliff edges coming up in terms of when the furlough scheme starts to taper off and eventually ends. So we might see more people shift into that unemployment category. And we've also got the situation of this group of key workers and those sectors identified as by government for being absolutely critical to keeping our economy going. And the idea of reward has come up very much through the crisis. So how we pay them back somehow, which I think is a really important contextual factors for the Build Back Better initiative. When it comes to the forecasts about where we might be heading, higher unemployment seems inevitable, although how high that might go is still quite unknown. There are forecasts out there that suggest that up to a third of jobs in Wales might be at risk, and that could be concentrated in particular sectors like manufacturing and some of those sectors that were forced to close, like retail, hospitality and tourism in particular. What we're very, very worried about is that that could exacerbate existing inequalities. So we might see younger people particularly hit, we might see women and BME workers who are already disadvantaged in our labour market further affected by this. And we might also see a growth in precarious work. Well, in terms of pre-crisis statistics, around 1 in 10 people were in some form of precarious work, whether that's working on an agency basis, on a 0 hours contract, on a low hours contract. There are so many different types of ways that you know, workers don't have a secure job, and we might see an increase in that if we don't see the right policy interventions. Because I think one of the lessons that employers might have taken from this crisis is that to protect themselves, it can be beneficial to not have that that proper employment relationship with a staff member. So we need policy to reflect that and make sure the incentives are in place to make sure that we don't see that growth in precarious work. And obviously the problems we had before the crisis haven't gone away. So regional inequality is quite a factor in Wales. So this map shows where people earn, the percentage of people that don't earn the voluntary hourly living wage rate. And that ranges quite a lot. So in some parts of Wales, you've got 1 in 3 workers at risk of not earning that. And then in other parts, you're down to 1 in 5. So we've got all sorts of issues like that, things like the gender pay gap, the BME pay gap, that haven't gone away. And then that leads to the high rate of poverty we've got in Wales. And I'm obsessed with this chart because I think it's just really remarkable how, in the way we recovered from the last recession, the change we saw in poverty and in households where all adults in work living in poverty, I think, was one of the most remarkable transformations. We would still say that work is the best route out of poverty, but increasingly it's not a route out of poverty for some people. And I think the UK social security system has a big role to play in that. And that's why we need really strong policy in Wales that can counter some of that effect. So I'm just going to cover what fair work is, because I think what's happened over the last few months has made us forget about what a lot of our existing policy priorities are. And it's always good to be reminded of a report lots of us read probably about a year ago now. As unions, we've always believed that we can't address like the symptoms of an unfair labour market. We have to address the root cause. So that relationship between an employer and a worker, an individual worker, is never going to be equal. And if we rely on an individualised route to addressing employment matters, so individuals taking things to tribunal, or individuals enforcing their employment rights through other means in the workplace, through conversations with their manager, that type of thing, we're never going to see the types of significant change that we need to see to improve the quality of work in Wales and the rest of the UK. What we want to see is as many unionised workplaces as possible. So currently around a third of workplaces in Wales have collective agreements in place. That's where the workers come together as a collective and vote on things like pay rise, things like pensions, and that there's a statutory right to that, but it's all quite complex and it only really kicks in larger workplaces, and it's something that we won't see a growth in without support from policy. And we've also advocated this at the policy making level as well. So balancing out the interests between business and workers at all levels, we think is a key aspect of achieving greater social justice in Wales. And we think that it's intrinsically linked to inequality more broadly in our society. So just making sure that workers have that say will achieve greater and fairer outcomes for everybody. So really making ideas like inclusive growth real. So the Fair Work Commission actually came out of social partnership in Wales. So social partnership is the structures through which government engages with business and the workforce through the collective voice of unions. And the commission was set up in late 2018. It included like a good balance of people with a union and business background, as well as academia. And their report contains lots and lots of recommendations. And what was absolutely key is that it contains a definition of fair work, because that's something that we struggle to reach as social partners ourselves. So it was really helpful to have their input on that. And their definition is comprehensive. It's identifying, I think, a lot of the issues that with work that are cross-sectoral. So it's not just focusing on pay, but also the right to secure work, the right for progression, which is something that we know that a lot of people do not have good access to. Also things like a safe workplace, which I think over the last few months people have really been reminded of the importance of health and safety at work. And the ideas of equality and inclusion run throughout. And what's absolutely key for us is that employee voice and collective representation were included as characteristics of that definition. But for us, I think they're both part of the definition, but the key vehicle for getting there, because you can't introduce blanket policies that will reflect what workers want in every context. You can introduce safety nets, you can introduce the lowest acceptable level. That's what the minimum wage does really well. But then you need to have the mechanisms within the workplace that will both reflect what those workers actually want and make sure that you've got a process in place to enforce that. So when things aren't going well, that's where industrial action plays a role. And when things are going well, you've got healthy industrial relations. You've got the roles of trade union reps and trade union members to make sure that they're constantly reviewing workplace policy and improving things and moving into new areas. Trade unions work a lot on skills, they work a lot on the equality agenda, and that's the way that we'll see improvements in our workplaces that matter to everybody and reflect people's different circumstances. And this union impact is evidenced by lots of research as well. We know that unionised workplaces and workers in those sites have higher rates of pay. They've got better access to on-the-job training, and that's really important that it's on-the-job training and not outside of working hours, so they're paid for that time. and they have better policies and practices relating to equalities matters, and their health and safety and well-being is higher, and also things that matter to the employer, so things like job security and stability are also improved, so you get lower staff turnover. And even things like innovation in the workplace has been shown to be greater and also more inclusive if you've got a union in there making sure that things like the skills programme is properly inclusive. So pre-crisis, our vision for making Wales a Fair Work nation, is how we used to talk about it, was around delivering on the Fair Work Commission report and really looking at how we address workplace culture rather than a kind of top-down approach. And we think that will be the key to a more inclusive economy. And building back better, maybe that should say build back better, I'm not sure. Building back better offers a chance to do that in a far more kind of fundamental, shifting ownership model type approach. So in some ways it could be quite exciting, but we need to recognise where people were at greater risk before, and that our interventions don't either sustain that risk or increase it. And two sectors stand out for us in particular, tourism and hospitality, because they are both sectors which are very important to Wales's economy. It's over 100,000 workers are employed in those sectors, and there's a lot of public money going into them, but we don't have many of the kind of key levers to influence change because they're poorly unionised, so workers don't have much of a voice, and we don't have any of the types of industrial relations or employment rights powers here in Wales to influence them in the way we would have liked to before the crisis. They stood out to us before, and we were keen to look at interventions that would support workers in those sectors because of the prevalence of precarious work in them. The use of things like 0 hours contracts is extremely high. Low pay is very, very common, and like I mentioned, worker voice is very weak. But we also have a serious issue with illegal employment practices in those sectors. So things like minimum wage underpayment, illegal use of contracts, things like people not getting their statutory holiday entitlements, and obviously the kind of consequential impacts of that on the communities in which these people work in and their families, their home life is huge, and it's the sort of thing that we're trying to address through anti-poverty initiatives all the time. And it's something that the workers themselves don't always recognise or aren't able to do anything about because they haven't got that collective bargaining mechanism within the workplace. And because employment law relating to their situation, if they're on a 0 hours contract, for instance, is so complex, research has shown that workers don't always recognise that they're actually experiencing illegal employment practices. So you almost get this kind of false confidence that actually, you know, either the idea that people are happy to be in precarious work, or that they are getting their rights based on surveying. When further research has been done in these areas, they've actually shown that people don't want to do anything, that people aren't actually getting what they're entitled to. And I think what it's come down to in discussions that we've had with employers' side about this has been that the business model just didn't allow for fairer work. That's what we were told when we were trying to have these discussions around the Fair Work Commission's report. And it's obviously very difficult when you collectively bargain. The employer should open up their books so you have an idea about what their margins are and what, you know, how the profits could be shared a bit better between the workers. We're not in that situation in a lot of places in these two sectors. And if it is the business model, we have to take them at their word. We think that when it comes to recovery, we can't be continuing to fund business models that only allow for unfair work. And that's where we think unionised cooperatives offer an opportunity and potentially a bit of a solution to the prevalence of unfair work in these sectors. So Unionised co-ops have come up quite a bit in the last couple of years in relation to precarious work, and particularly the gig economy. So we've seen examples of things like the Drive Cooperative in Cardiff, where they've been organising platform workers in a unionised co-op model. And there's been a lot of work in the US as well around this. So explicitly including collective bargaining as part of the foundation of that cooperative. So not just worker ownership, but also the collective voice of the workforce as part of the creation of that co-op. Which means that you don't just, you haven't just got the shared ownership element, but you've also got that fair work idea included in it from the outset. We think that in terms of tourism and hospitality, they are going to need a huge amount of support to rebuild after this crisis. And when government is intervening, when we're only talking about public money here, not investment from other sources like the third sector, some charities invest and also banks. But when it's public money, they should be looking to prioritise these models rather than those old existing business models that seem to have unfair work built in. And we also think there's a benefit here in terms of not just sharing the gains and that inclusive growth approach, but also about sharing the risks, because we know that we may be facing a second wave, and we don't think it would be just to encourage people to pursue individual entrepreneurship in a sector that may be vulnerable to another crisis like this. I also wanted to touch on outsourced social care really quickly. We're not advocating the unionised co-op model in social care at all. As unions, we believe that it should be in the public sector. However, we know that over half the workforce now is outside the public sector, and we are really keen to see that the Build Back Better approach doesn't just focus on traditional sectors like manufacturing and infrastructure, but that we address the issues that have happened in care as well. We're all hugely grateful for what the care workforce has done through this crisis, through supporting the most vulnerable people in our society, and we have had serious concerns about the quality of employment in outsourced care for some time. We know that Welsh Government is committed now to setting up a Fair Work Forum in social care, and I think that's going to be another route to bringing about greater workforce voice in the care sector, and we very much see it as a step towards sectoral bargaining, and that will be linking pay to the qualifications framework and the accredited skills that people need to be care workers in Wales. So it's just another way of bringing about fair work in a sector that has really been lacking it, and I thought that might be of interest because I know lots of people are involved in the care sector who attend this meeting. So thank you very much for listening, and that's my email address if you want to get in touch about anything. Thanks, Vicky. Oh, I think you're on mute, Vicky.
I am. Thank you very much for pointing that out. I didn't press the button hard enough. Okay, so thank you very much, Nisreen. That was really, really interesting. So our third speaker this afternoon is Sarah Birch. Sarah is manager of the Gateway Credit Union, which has got over 4,000 members across Torfaen and the Monmouthshire Council areas. So Sarah, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that no rest idea rather chimes with me, because that's what it feels like we've been at for a while now. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the credit unions over the last 20 years and how we've responded to the pandemic, and then a bit about what the future looks like. So if I can share a graph, and I'm hoping that has worked. So, I'm hoping you can. I'm hoping you can now see the little graph. Then that is the savings and loans growing in the last 20 years. The credit unions of Wales. So we've outlived some of the profit-driven lenders. Northern Rock, Wonga, Bright House, But we're seeing a level of household indebtedness carrying on rising. And we've been just growing steadily by offering those affordable, fair loans, encouraging people to save. We're some way behind our cousins in the mutual building societies, and we're not yet competing with the high street banks for scale, but we are actually the major providers of affordable credit with a loan book that's actually in Wales, of the credit union movement in Wales, it's actually larger than the whole UK CDFI movement. And with the continuing support of Welsh Government, we've been improving our digital offering, opening new branches and building partnerships with employers. And okay, sorry, I'm moving on to the next. That you should have the little graphic of where all the branches are, the credit union branches in Wales. So you can see that there are a lot of us, and we are working together as the Credit Unions of Wales. But of course, in March, everything changed. Up until now, I'm speaking for Gateway now, we've been very much a paper and face-to-face first kind of organisation, staff and volunteers. We do digital. You can use the app. We've got a good website, and obviously people answer the phone. People phone up for withdrawals and so on. But very much face-to-face was the primary channel. We have old-fashioned habits like people actually putting a signature on a piece of paper when they take out a loan. And that's changed. We've had to send our volunteers home, equip staff to work remotely. We've actually gone end-to-end with our loan application fully digital. So you can apply online, share your bank statements, your banking information online, sign the loan agreement on your phone, a bit like signing a parcel. And we've made that switch really, to being wholly phone and digital. From next week, we will actually be seeing people face to face again. So those of the team who've been back off furlough are back in now and training up on new things. But our priority has been to keep the members informed and keeping their confidence, making sure that everybody can access funds and supporting the members who are in difficulty. So we've released people's locked Christmas savings. We've given payment holidays on loans where it's needed. We've topped up loans to help tide people over. We've phoned our regular cash payers, our elderly members, just to check in and check that they're okay. Tried to dissuade them from coming down the town and posting cash through the letterbox, but not always entirely successfully. And what we've seen yet again is that credit union difference. We get people saving. So even if you come to the credit union for a loan, you will end up with a loan and a savings account. And what we see time and time again is that the difference in people's resilience, household resilience, between the massive proportion of the population who have no savings and those who even have 500 or £1,000 in savings, when things go wrong, when you're on furlough, when your pattern of shopping changes or your money doesn't come in, you can cope. So that has been our last 3 months. We've also opened accounts for some of the new community groups that have sprung up. We can do that more flexibly than the bank. And it's very much the same thing of personal support for our members. We know that there are going to be a lot of challenges. We're already seeing bad debt rise. When you ask for a payment holiday on a loan, then that's great for the person who needs that breathing space. It is less good, obviously, for the lender, who then has to provide for the possibility of that loan never being repaid. We're expecting that challenge of arrears and defaults. At the moment, we're seeing a rise in savings. All the people who would usually have taken their money out and gone and spend it, taking the kids away for Easter and buying summer clothes, haven't been spending. And we're also seeing a reduction in lending because either people can't afford to pay it back, and we can see that, and as responsible lenders, we turn them down, or else the people are just putting off, sensible people are putting off making big financial decisions at the moment. And that, I think, is what is driving a lot of change in the economy. We are very much part of the foundation economy. Our members are the market traders, they're the hairdressers, they're the care workers, the public service key workers, everybody from the midwives to the grave diggers. And as I think I said it in the blog, we finance the young family's new furniture, the van for the trader delivering it, and we've probably got the housing officers' summer holiday savings as well. Because our aspiration is to be everybody's first choice, and to have payroll savings partnerships with every Welsh employer. So in terms of talking about fair work, good work, part of the package, I would hope might be there, that you know, the option to save direct from your pay, because it just is a real lifesaver when things change. So the UK government has promised a new legislative framework. We're hoping that that doesn't get dropped off the legislative programme. That's going to allow us, we hope, to promote insurance products. We've seen, you know, my colleagues in Dragon Savers around the Canantaf would very much have liked all their members to have had home insurance in the recent floods. We would like to be able to develop rent to own, the sort of Bright House model where you can get the washing machine and pay for it over weekly terms, but in a fair way. And some of the other freedoms that other credit unions in other countries have. And we're working together as credit unions of Wales on things like collaborative IT procurement, joint marketing, and just general support for best practice. So yeah, living our cooperative values, and it's a very exciting time. We don't know what is going to happen to the economy. We don't know what is going to happen to the financial services industry more widely. But we are very much there, ready to step in and carry on supporting our communities across Wales.
Thank you very much, Sarah. That was a really useful rundown on the state of play with credit unions. So thank you very much for your contribution. So last but not least, we have Derek Walker, who, as I'm sure you will all know, is the Chief Executive of the Wales Cooperative Centre, who do such great work promoting and nurturing cooperative principles across Wales. So Derek, over to you.
Thank you, Vicky. Hello, everyone. My job is not to speak very much, but to set up a discussion now about what comes next and how we influence what comes next in a cooperative way. But before I do so, I wanted to bring in just one more speaker. We weren't sure whether was going to be here today. That's Paul from Drive Cooperative that's already had a mention today. So I hope that's all right, Paul. You're looking surprised. But you know, one thing that's been clear throughout this crisis, we've seen all organisations from all sectors step up. It doesn't matter what sector they've been in. You've seen good examples from the voluntary sector, from the private sector. But you know, if it's a co-op or it's a social enterprise, all of them will have stepped up and supported their community and their members during this time of crisis. And that really is the cooperative difference, that you see stories across the co-op and social enterprise movement doing different things in response to this crisis, and no better illustrated than the Drive Cooperative story. So Paul, if it's okay with you, could you unmute yourself and just say a little bit about what the Drive Co-op has done?
Yeah, thanks, Derek. Basically, as soon as lockdown came in, we lost 95% of our pre-booked work over the next 3 months. We had to find out other ways of generating an income for our drivers who are still working. So what we decided as a collective was to offer free shopping trips for elderly, vulnerable, people who are shielding, self-isolating. But we paid the drivers out of our own coffers, so to speak. We'd accumulated funds over the last year to pay for a better dispatch system. We decided to use them funds to pay drivers to do these free shopping trips for those that needed it most. It's really kicked on from there. We've offered 25% discounts for key workers, not only NHS workers, but also support workers, care home workers, because they often get forgotten about, like was mentioned before. You've got the private sector in social care, which often get forgotten about when people talk about NHS workers. So we decided to help them as well. And it's really kicked on. We've attracted a hell of a lot of new customers over this pandemic, which is a surprise. We're starting to see a lot of the old customers come back now who are venturing out because of lockdowns easing. Hopefully, fingers crossed, things will start getting better. I just hope that in the next few months, what we've seen over the last few months with a rise in sort of a community spirit carries on, and that's not forgotten about, because we've all seen the clap for the NHS workers on a Thursday. I mean, the community where I live, people are talking to each other now, whereas before they never used to walk past and it was just a cursory nod. Now people are actually talking. I just hope that continues into the future.
Thank you, Paul. Sorry to put you on the spot there, but I thought it was worth sharing your story. So I just wanted to open up the discussion now. And if you could, as Vicky mentioned, put your questions in the chat function so that Vicky can call you or ask your question if you prefer it that way. There is an opportunity, as a number of the speakers have said, that comes out of this crisis, which is around creating a different type of economy in what's a real danger that we slip back very quickly into the old ways of doing things. There will be pressure from many to the old ways of doing things. So while this door is slightly ajar, or more ajar than it has been, how do we influence what comes next to create a better, more cooperative country and built on cooperative values and principles? We have seen, and you'll have seen too, the number of mutual aid groups that have sprung up across the country in response to COVID-19. I've looked into them a little bit. Many of you will be involved in them potentially, but as a whole, they are very mutual in spirit, very grassroots, bottom-up organisations adopting mutual values. That is a sign of people coming together in this time, as Paul has mentioned. But how do we build on that? How do we support those that want to continue to carry on to do other things, to incorporate, to do other things in their community? And, you know, is there an opportunity to work with them to help them to do more in their community in the months and years ahead? There are lots of ideas being presented, and there are lots of people putting agendas on the table, and it's our opportunity now really to try and influence that. I would, flag also the Co-op Party report recently called Owning the Future, which also makes a big contribution to this discussion, and supporting those people that have helped the communities through the crisis benefit more through the rebound by owning the structures and the businesses that come next. We've got our own ideas at Wales Co-op, and we've been working with the social enterprise sector to put together a vision and action plan for the next 10 years, which has been had to be slightly redrafted in light of COVID, but still stands and develops a framework for the future for us to build on. So we are planning to launch that in a couple of weeks. I think the provisional date is the 15th of July. But that provides a framework. It doesn't provide all the detail and all the actions that we need to be taking forward. So I would welcome people's thoughts and ideas and questions to the panelists to inform that discussion. Thank you, Vicky.
Thank you, Derek. I'm just looking at the chat now, and it's full of thanks to everyone for their lovely presentations. I'm just waiting to see if any questions will arise. Maybe it's easiest to ask if people would like to give a wave if they've got a question to ask. That could be a good way to start it off.
Can I jump in, Vicky, with one thing, perhaps one thing I was going to mention? I mean, I guess there is a temptation to push for projects and initiatives and funding, which is all well and good. But there is, you know, if we're going to see the lasting change that we want to see, surely it's got to be a much more systematic change to what the economy is for. You know, what is the economy for? How do we talk about the economy? How do we measure what happens? How do we decide on how public money is spent to support the economy and supporting businesses in a different way than we have done previously? So yeah, I think being ambitious about our ideas and our thoughts is key.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Maybe the presentations were so good that they've just answered everyone's questions. Hang on. Here we go. We've got one from Catherine. Rather than reinvent the wheel, how can we encourage people to get involved with existing co-ops and credit unions rather than set up new ones? Which of our contributors would like to give us their thoughts on that?
I can just say one or two ideas there, if you like. They're a little bit conceptual, so please forgive me. I think there are many amazing stories out there. Paul has just given us one that just get lost. They don't get aired, and that's a problem. And I think as you know, as a member of Cardiff Business School, for example, we are trying our best now to engage much more with our local community and engage on a public values agenda. And I think educational institutions could be vehicles to energize a youthful population. It's a cliche, I understand, but I will say this: far too often in business schools, we celebrate possibly the wrong heroes. We don't celebrate our local heroes, and having contact with some of those local heroes and some of those local stories that you know, do profit for purpose or are just, you know, adding tremendous social value to our communities and to those in need are essential. And so I guess a kind of formal relationships with our educational institutes all the way through from primary school to our universities would be a good starting point, because one of the things that I'm seeing with our younger generation is, yes, they're all woke, and yes, they're all more engaged, but there's still a kind of buyer behavior gap. They're still queuing outside Primark on a Saturday when they could. They're still into throwaway fashion. They still operate quite conspicuously as a result of Instagram and these kinds of things. If you can merge these two up, you know, you're onto a winner somewhere. So we could, as I said, sorry, forgive me, it's a little bit conceptual, but yeah.
Well, that's great. Thank you very much. Any of our other contributors like to come in on that? No? Okay. Let's go on. Oh, hang on.
Myself, sorry, I was too slow with mute. I just wanted to say, I think particularly in the creative industries that are really suffering at this time because artists and musicians and performers aren't able to practice their trade really in the way they were before, and I think their engagement with existing co-ops and growing the creative industries cooperative movement could be a really important way forward for them.
Thank you, Nisreen. Anyone else? Give me a wave if you wanted to come in. Yeah, go on, Sarah.
I think a lot of it does come back to the idea of ownership, which is not something that the mainstream of people really think about. They'll engage with a brand. Does that brand deliver what they want and their brand values and so on, rather than necessarily thinking about who owns that business. I mean, we put on every membership card that every member has when they join. Who owns Gateway Credit Union? You do. And try and reinforce that sense of ownership. But still, when we have an annual general meeting, we still get, it's still the volunteers and the staff generally, and a couple of members who want to come and tell us what happened to their Christmas money. So yeah, it is difficult to get that kind of engagement that people just want very often, the product or service, and they want it to be good. They don't really want to get involved in running the show, because that's our job.
Thank you very much. Anyone else then before we move on to the next question? We've got quite a lot of questions come in now. Okay, so Adrian, I believe you have a question for the panel.
Hi there, I've just typed it out, but I'll recite it for you. So my question is, how could the co-op movement become more joined up with other movements that are particularly relevant to the COVID/climate change situation we are in, e.g. environmentalism, community activism and localism?
Good question. Okay, Derek, would you like to kick off with that?
I'm going to try. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of overlap there already, and a lot of co-ops within those sectors already. But I do think there is a danger that people arguing for roughly similar things are split in different directions rather than working together, and that reduces the impact and success that we can have in making our arguments. I'd be interested in people's reaction to this. The Wellbeing Economy Alliance is starting to have discussions. I'm not sure if anyone in the room here is part of that. So a few years ago, I think it was a few years ago, the Welsh Government signed up to being a wellbeing economy country, along with Scotland and New Zealand and Iceland, I think. And that was about a different type of economy, just what we've been talking about here. And in Scotland, they've established a wellbeing economy. I think it's an alliance, they call it, but it's bringing together a broader range of groups, perhaps in the way that Adrian has talked about, to collaborate, to push for this different type of economy, each having their own specialisms and own areas of interest, but really coming back together in some sort of an alliance to push for things that they have in common, and as a result be more successful. And I know in Wales some people, and we've been involved in early discussions, have started to think, well, is this something that could bring together the groups Adrian's listed, the foundational economy network, into a much more powerful group of organisations outside government that can work with government but be independent of government to change the system, to talk differently about the economy. So, I think that has some potential. I need to find out more. It's a global movement, but it does seem to have potential to bring people together.
Thanks, Derek. Anyone else like to come in on that? Nisreen?
Give a half an hour to unmute myself. I think we've been talking a lot about the idea of just transition in the union movement, so a transition which works for workers as well as the employer. And I think that that's something which cooperatives could really latch onto and think about the sorts of transformations they need to be making to reduce their carbon footprint and other environmental changes in a fair way. So where there is a workforce, including their voice, but also engaging with the other groups that have been mentioned. So bringing in lots of ideas, because I think often when we talk about just transition, we think about it only being relevant to our manufacturing sector, to heavy industries, but actually it's relevant to every workplace, and all of us should be thinking about the sorts of differences that we can make. And I think it's actually quite a good hook for activism and trade unionism within the workplace. I think it captures people's imagination and enthusiasm for activism in a way that some of the traditional areas don't quite. I don't think anyone's, like, young people are saying they're desperate to be a health and safety rep, for example. So I think, yeah, that's something that I think both our organisations could explore quite well.
Thanks, Nasreen. Anyone else then before we move on to the next question? Dr. Samuel?
Yeah, I just wanted to maybe comment on some of the more successful movements that have worked around place-centric values. So, for example, the Fair Trade Towns movement was very, very successful in galvanizing a sustainability agenda around place. So, in other words, people's kind of passion for their hometown really galvanized and brought people together from disparate movements with one kind of umbrella agenda. There are opportunities here, and I know Sarah Evans, who's now with the Co-op, sorry to talk about you there, Sarah, has done some work on social enterprise places in Wrexham, where it kind of brought the social enterprise community together to, if you like, try to gain traction for the movement within their own backyard. And those things tend to attract, if you like, people's deep sense of commitment to a place is a very magnetic kind of force, if you like. So that's another idea, I guess.
Thank you. So we'll move on to the next question now, which is from Ian Thomas. Hi, Ian. So Ian's asking, how can we better engage people with the foundational economy post-COVID? We'd like to kick off with that. Sarah.
Well, I think it's actually quite an exciting time. People have realised that the supermarkets can't deliver everything, and the milkman and the butcher and the guy who does the veg box probably can. And a lot of people are saying that in future they are going to stick with some of those local businesses and help them to survive, particularly the local businesses that have been out delivering and filling the gap during the lockdown. Whether that will actually happen when it's a matter of price and convenience and everything goes back to normal has still to be seen, I think.
Yes, I couldn't agree with you more. You know, when I look at my personal Facebook timeline, is full of people extolling the virtues of shopping locally and getting these deliveries, supporting local businesses. But the key is whether we can make that a long-term behavioural change, really, isn't it? Derek?
Yeah, I think that's true, but I think we will not be successful if we just rely on that happening. You know, I think people will want to do it. They'll say they want to do it. I'm guilty of this, and then you'd end up going to the supermarket because it's all in one place. So we need to make that easier for people, don't we? And as well as convince them through their heartstrings and their brain that this is the right thing to do, we need to make that easier for them. And some of the things that we've seen in response to COVID have enabled that. So I don't know if you saw on the BBC News a few weeks ago in Monmouthshire, there was a cooperative arrangement enabling people to get fresh produce and local produce collectively. So they'd book it and it would go to this warehouse and, you know, they could collect it in one go. It was all, I think, mostly local products, but you'd collect it in one go. It was already packed for you and so forth, making it as easy as going to a supermarket to get your local goods. We've tried to do that with one of our clients in West Wales a few years ago, and they found it too difficult to do that, to make it work. It was too expensive. But you know, maybe its time has come again. You know, the other thing I was thinking, you know, digital platforms, digital cooperative type online platforms are another way that we could perhaps help people to access goods and services in a more democratic way, and those platforms are not exploitative and extractive, if that's the word, but they are owned by those people that are using that platform. You know, there's a lot of tech, I guess, involved in a lot of that, and it's beyond my brief. But you know, it's those sorts of things I think that we need to look at to make things easier for people to be able to do the right thing.
Great, thanks, Derek. Anyone else on that then? Okay, let's move on to the next question. So this comes from Marco, and Marco asks, how do you think we can tap into the motivations and visions that young people have for their future? Anthony, I know that's something that you were focused on in your presentation, so I don't know if you want to kick off with an answer to that, putting you on the spot.
Yeah, thanks, Vicky. Yeah, I think you know, the Welsh Cooperative Centre and Cardiff University, we're already talking about quite an exciting scheme that Martin has come up with. But perhaps I'll let Martin have a little talk about that. But before that, I guess one of the things we need to ensure is that social entrepreneurship, cooperatives is back on the curriculum. Far too long, I suppose we've had a very neoliberal-centric curriculum through the economics we teach, the way business is set up, and you know, we kind of, and I'm guilty of this, we celebrate, as I said, you know, entrepreneurs that aren't even part of our world. So bringing along those local stories, allowing that local engagement. But I think key for us is allowing, I can remember many years ago we had the Entrepreneurial Fund in Wales, where we spent a significant amount of money trying to create new entrepreneurs within Wales and the Welsh Valleys. And every university, college, school had a champion, an entrepreneurial champion. And at that point, the focus was heavily on, we can only really support as a government fast-growing businesses. But yet our businesses in Wales are lifestyle businesses, they're social businesses, they're small businesses. But the support and the value that was given to them wasn't necessarily there. So I guess for us as an institution, as a university or as a college, we need to respect these family lifestyle businesses, these social enterprises, the cooperatives, and really allow them a voice, if you like, in accessing funding and accessing support. Perhaps I'll leave Martin say a couple of words on his kind of ideas that we're already moving towards, if you wouldn't mind. Is that okay, Martin?
Yes, no problem at all. Yeah, it was interesting picking up on Marco's comment. So the universities and colleges collaborated together recently to produce a startup week for the whole of Wales, 500 students involved, which was absolutely brilliant. It was a great effort, but there was no emphasis at all on social enterprise or any form of social business within it, which was really disappointing. So I think, you know, unless the enterprise champions across Wales are promoting it, unless at that level of promoting entrepreneurship, that social entrepreneurship has a more kind of prominent voice to it, yeah, we're not going to see, I guess, the numbers. Even though I think the backdrop is there, I think young people are thinking much more ethically, you know, mindedly. Anthony and I have worked together on sort of a hackathon event with 90 of his students, using a social enterprise from the Cannon Valley as a sort of a life case study. So I want to see more of those things develop. Ran an event like it in Wrexham called the Wrexham Hack of Kindness. Again, engaging young people, engaging startups, but it's significantly in Wrexham, people from the community, people from you know, quite a variety of backgrounds getting involved and thinking creatively about new ideas and new social business ideas that identify their community. And yeah, a few more thoughts up the sleeve, but I'll save those for another day.
Thanks, Martin. Anyone else like to come in on this? Nisreen?
Just from a bit more of a not so positive perspective, I think we risk young people becoming really disillusioned if we don't make that reward for key workers a reality. I think if either they themselves or their family or friends have been working through this crisis and they don't see any kind of material change, I'm thinking particularly about care workers on this. I think I can't imagine what that will do to their faith in society and politics and all types of things like that. So I think where I think the co-op movement and unions need to work together is in making that idea of fair reward and fair work a reality for all our key workers in particular.
Thank you. And it's interesting that most of the things we've talked about, they actually bring us back to the foundational economy again, doesn't it, in line with Ian's previous question. Okay, so the next question is from Vicky, who says, not me, the other Vicky, says, with the social impact of the Wales cooperative, they seem to be, or from the South Wales perspective, how can we bring Wales together as a whole to help increase the impact of the support? As individually, I have great support, but North Wales still seems fractured. Any takers for that? That's a tricky one, isn't it?
I better come back on that one, had I? Is that okay, Vicky?
Yes, yeah, definitely. Okay, so
I mean, we try to we deliver a service right across Wales, and it's the same for every part of Wales. I think what I'm just speaking from a Wales Co-op Centre perspective. I think what we are looking to do better, I guess that means what we could be doing better, is really getting involved in adapting that to local and regional circumstances. So one size doesn't fit all. There are different priorities in different areas. We're seeing regional structures decide on how the economy, what the priorities for the economy should be in different areas. And we need to be influencing that for the benefit of co-ops and social enterprises. We've just done our first report, about to be published in I'm not sure when, a few weeks, looking at the North Wales economy and social enterprises in that economy and where they're strong, where they could be stronger, what support they particularly need. And we're hoping to replicate that for the South East and the South West, but we've started in North Wales. There has been an open door in North Wales and the North Wales Economic Ambition Board in talking about this with them. That hasn't been the case in other parts of the country. These structures are dominated largely by traditional types of business, and we need to change that. Maybe I've gone off track here, Vicky, and that's actually not bringing Wales together, but that's doing things differently in different parts of Wales. But nonetheless, you get my point that taking a different approach in different parts of Wales to recognise the different circumstances and different economy needs to be more of what we're about. That's just our reaction at the centre. You may think that's wrong, and happy to be challenged, but that's where we are thinking at the moment.
okay. Thank you, Derek. Vicky, I hope that was a helpful response for you. I can see you nodding there. So just scrolling through the chat now, I think this next question is this one from David, and I completely agree with him. Thinking back to my teaching days and teaching the Welsh back, he says the Welsh back Advanced Skills Challenge certification is due to significantly change. This will include a new focus upon active citizenship in addition to employability. Can we all be prepared to take advantage of this new opportunity with the forthcoming Qualifications Wales consultation starting on the 7th of September? And I'd just like to add to that, as someone who was taught the Welsh back for quite a few years before I was elected, that there's virtually no resources out there for teachers at all. So I think that if things could be provided, then you'd have a very, very high probability of teachers using them, because everyone who teaches the Welsh back does it in addition to their specialist subject. And it's the last thing really that any teacher wants to do is to have to go home and start preparing things from scratch for the Welsh back. So I see see a good opportunity for us here, and I completely agree with what David said. So who's got the answer to this one then?
Well, that's an answer really, but we've always been, the credit unions have always been done savings clubs, and we mostly had success in the primary schools. And that's great in terms of teaching people a little bit about money and a little bit about a cooperative and get them to do some rewriting as well. But it's been very difficult, I think, to establish that with the secondary schools. And I think that's where the real work needs to be done about, social purpose of money. What is money? How do you handle it? And also, what's a cooperative? What does it mean to be a member of a cooperative as opposed to merely a customer of a business? So, yeah, looking forward to that one.
Great. Dr. Samuel, you'd like to come in here?
I guess I just wanted to say that some of the events that myself and Martin have run at the university level, like hackathons around social enterprise and social innovation, surely they could be part of the Welsh Back Day. And one thing maybe that the whole sector is very difficult to achieve is, I suppose, is students want to know more about them, but we're quite complex models. We're quite complex organizations to explain in very, very quick branded snapshots. So if that can be achieved, I think, again, that there's opportunities there. But certainly the hackathon model, I'm sure if somebody was teaching the Welsh Back maybe in any of our schools, would welcome a few willing individuals to come along for the day to run a kind of a live piece of problem solving learning then, which we know is far more engaging than just chalk and talk and didactic teaching. So a problem solving learning by a multi-stakeholder group of people who are maybe representative in this room would certainly, would I'm sure, gain some traction.
Yeah, I think that's a really good practical idea. We just need someone to set it up. David, do you want to come in?
I just unmuted myself. Thank you, Chair. It strikes me that for over a century, the cooperative movement has not invested in training, learning, and information for its members. And the challenge at the moment is too great. And that's why it's really essential we get stuck into the national curriculum and actually understand how this provides great opportunities for highlighting, if you like, the contribution we can make in building a better Wales. I think the key problem we've got at the moment is that the curriculum, in a sense, is being localized. So I think what's going to be important is the way in which, at a local level, challenges can actually be offered to pupils and teachers. So that, for example, from a trade union perspective, the inquiry could be about not how to organise a bingo session with older people in a local church hall, but maybe to explore what it would take for for every business in a locality to be paying a real living wage. Now, if you then look at it through a cooperative lens, it may well be that there might be a connection with a credit union locally, and the credit union, if it hasn't already got material, could have material that was localized or maybe could offer a challenge to pupils in particular schools. And I'm thinking especially in areas where the employer and the third sector input into Welsh Back is fairly weak. I mean, South East Wales is a classic example. I think rural areas are another example. So it's just a question of how collectively we can work together using existing resources around pointing out what sort of challenges are available and how we could make electronically data available that would support youngsters in undertaking that challenge, and maybe the opportunity of identifying mentors that could be supportive of pupils who will now be working in teams rather than in groups because of social distancing reasons. I'll stop at that, Chair.
Thank you, David. Okay, so we're coming towards the end, and I can see that Mike hasn't forgotten about his poll because he's put it up on the screen for us. So, Mike, would you like to talk us through what you'd like us to do now, please?
Yeah, thanks, Vicky, and thanks for chairing today's session. It's been great, and thank you to all the speakers that have contributed and for everyone attending here today. I just thought it'd be good. We're trying to gather a number of events we've been delivering over the last few months during lockdown at the Wales Cooperative Centre. Just trying to gauge sort of people's opinions with delivering sessions online to delivering sessions in person. And I think when we do go back to what they call the new normal, what our events are going to look like. And I think cross-party group is a really good example of how we can actually stretch our reach, because I think a number of these events we've staged at the Zenith, and it's been difficult for people to attend on a specific day and location. So I think we've seen there's representatives here from right across Wales today, including like Pembrokeshire County Council and the like. So I think we just wanted to put the question out there about how people would like to see these meetings delivered in future. So that would be really, really valuable input. And yeah, I'd also like to, probably in a follow-up to this, I'll ask the speakers if they were happy to share their presentations, but we will be sharing presentations if the speakers are happy afterwards in an email. And I'd also like to gauge people's opinions about what they've learned from today. If people are new to cooperatives and new to this this way of working, I'd very much like to see if people have learned anything new from today's session and how we can take some of these ideas forward. So I'll be sending an email following this event, which will hopefully we can gather all of those opinions and making sure that we've got some really positive outcomes that have come out of this. So yeah, thank you all.
Thanks. I just want to highlight Sarah Evans' comment in the chat there, where she says that the majority of the issues that we've raised are highlighted in the vision and action plan for the social enterprise sector in Wales, and invites us to join for the launch on the 15th of July. It's been my first ever virtual cross-party group, and I chaired it at the same time as well, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought that it went really well. I hope that you enjoyed it too. I'd like to thank all of our contributors for some really, really excellent points that were made. Lots of food for thought there, and it leaves me in no doubt as to the health of the cooperative sector in Wales and the thinking behind that. So unless anyone has any other comments, and I can see there's a few hands raised, we go to Derek first then.
Sorry, no, that was just me clapping.
David's doing a thumbs up and Kara's doing a clap as well. Great. Okay, I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you very much indeed. And I hope to see you all either virtually or in person very soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vicky. That worked really well. Thank you, Vicky. Thank you, speakers. That seemed to work technically very well as the content was excellent. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you to Paul for all the technical support then.
Yeah, he's
thanks, Paul. Sorry, I didn't do a special mention for you there, Paul, but
no worries. But we had it in Cymraeg as well, but we didn't launch that.
The poll. I didn't launch the poll in Cymraeg. I didn't know to do it, so all I had was the poll. Did I have to end the last poll? Can I just switch to the other poll?
That's what I said in the email earlier. You've got to end one.
You got to end one. No, that's fine. So I think the poll results are a mixture of the two. So I think that's been the general consensus.
Nobody wants to go back to normal.
Yeah, I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah.
We can share the results if you haven't seen them.
Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Oh yeah, great. Yeah. Thanks.
Excellent.
Great.
No, that was great. It was good. Are you happy to do another one in the autumn, Vicky?
Yes, more than happy. Yep.
Yeah, great.
Great, and we've had confirmed, Vicky, this week.